thank each of you for being here, with particularize noteworthiness on the presence of Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, and also a member of our former member of our Board of Governors, Dr. Brown, State of Newport. Pleased to have her here as a member of this less audience. Could you take a look at the third sheet in on the material that was passed out to you by Ms. Small, who is the doctoral candidate, for those of you who are on the committee? You will notice that she has articulated the names of the people that are on the committee. And I'm going to ask her at this time to introduce each of these people. The reason for the delay is we're waiting for Dr. Voulynne. He's here for 7. So if Ms. Smith, if you could please introduce the committee members, and then I'll make an introductory comment and we'll start.
Okay. Now, first we have Dr. Edward Ford, who is the chair of my committee. And, good morning. Okay. And then we have Dr. Gilana Austin, and she's a member of the committee. Dr. Cynthia Wooten, also a member. Dr. Maticia is on the phone, and Dr. Shufalufi, and I'm not going to try your first name. Okay, all right. He's part of the committee as well, and of course the dean of the graduate school.
In addition, if you take a look at that first name under yours truly, I want to place a special note of commendation to Dr. Alston. Dr. Alston served for an interim period of time as the chair of this committee and did an excellent job. And I'm very pleased that she elected to remain on this committee after the department asked me to assume the responsibility following the departure of one other member of the committee. Now, you also notice that these committee members are widespread and that they have a tremendous amount of background experience. I can't say enough about the extraordinary efforts that these members of the committee have taken on behalf of the writings of our doctoral person. And I would say this at the very outset, that their commitment, their knowledge base, and that's important, their knowledge base of this topic, and their willingness to work closely with the committee chair and also certainly with the candidate has been extraordinary. So I would like to make that a matter of official record. The last point that I would make is that we have spent days, hours, weeks, months on this material in conjunction with not only the collection of the data, but also the significance of this mentoring issue as it impacts upon HBCUs. That is critically important because I think that you have to recognize the fact in this regard that when it comes to the issue of mentoring, that students that are in HBCU campuses or on HBCU campuses are absolutely and unequivocally in need of saying when that need appears. Additionally, I want to recognize the presence of Dr. Linda Wilson, who chaired her dissertation committee less than 6 months ago, and she is coming here today for purposes of seeing this presentation. She knows the family quite well and we're pleased to have it. And then ultimately, I want to make a comment concerning Dr. Comfort Apollo. Dr. Apollo is the chair of this committee and has an enormous bit of responsibility, given the fact that, as many of you are aware, there has been some structural reorganization within the departmental and within the school-specific and college-specific operation for the university. And in consequence of that, the decision was made by the chancellor to merge two departments such that adult education and the area of leadership studies were brought together as one. The adult education program at the master's level, and of course the PhD program for leadership studies. And so again, I want to commend Dr. Kenneth for the extraordinary way in which she has carried out very, very effectively the nuances that are associated with these structural differentiations. And so without further ado, Ms. Small is going to now bring forward her summarization of this dissertation. And I would say that her finalization of the document itself, as inculcated within the summary of this PowerPoint presentation, has sought very religiously to pay particularized attention to the comments that were made by the members of the committee in writing prior to today. And so without further ado, Ms. Small will come forward and make her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. And welcome again to each of you. And I am Voulynne Small. I'm a doctoral student here at North Carolina A&T State University. And I'm with the Leadership Studies and Adult Ed department. I'm going to present to you this morning my topic, which, let me go back to it. My topic, which is the perception of African American males, adult males, that influence their choice to mentor or not to mentor. And my focus is on high-risk adolescents and young adults. I'm going to cover, as Dr. Ford has said, I'm going to give you a summary of my chapter 1, give you a little bit of history on, or summary on my chapter 2 and chapter 3, and then I'm going to delve into my research, which is 4, and of course my conclusion. These are some things that were suggested, and so those things, of course, have been addressed in this document and in my PowerPoint so that you can see that they have already been addressed. Okay, chapter 1. My purpose is basically, my problem statement basically is that there's a deficiency in the number of adult males that are available to mentor high-risk, at-risk young males who are adolescents or young adults. I'm using the conceptual framework of social cultural perspective and the critical race perspective. And I'm using those because of their relationship. Your social culture basically talks about how we perceive and formulate our opinions and our perception. Critical race talks about taking marginal groups and giving them a voice. And of course, lived experiences of what you actually, how you interpret what you are experiencing. So that's the three there. The purpose of my study is to understand the lived experience of African American adult males as they are influenced to make the decision to mentor or not to mentor. My research question, my central research question is, how do African American males describe their lived experiences that influence their choice to mentor or not to mentor adolescents and young adult males between the ages of 14 and 24? I gave you some definitions. Of course, there are more, but I gave you some definitions, two that in particular, at risk, which are used, they are used interchangeably. And mentoring, of course, is a relationship, which is another thing that a lot of times people don't quite understand what that is. But it's a relationship where you're developing mutual understanding so you can support the development. Based on these statistics, and I'm not going to go through them all here, and if anybody wants them, I can share them with you later. But there are some statistics talking about how African American males are at the top of the deficiency areas. And of course, they have several vulnerabilities here. So therefore, based on those vulnerabilities, my significance for this study was because there was no evidence that I could find that addressed the African American male's choice to mentor or not to mentor. In addition to that, there was no information that actually talked about the justifying why African American males were not coming up to mentor or not to mentor. Okay. The next one is my my lit review, and of course, I focused in on the foundation of perception, and then I went into the historical relevance and the perceived benefits of mentoring. And I did that because there was no information that I could pull from, so I had to pull it from that. When I go into the history and the relevance, I basically had to go all the way back and look at not only slavery, but I also looked at the Civil Wars, and I also looked at the Second Reconstruction, and then moved up from there through the Industrial Revolution and everything for how mentoring was used. Of course, just to define perception is based on how the brain receives information that is sensory from our senses and how it forms those ideals. And of course, those ideals contribute to our attitudes and our behaviors. The methodology was that I wanted to uncover and understand the basis that influenced African American males to make the choices. That was the main thing that I was looking at. And of course, all of that was supported by the type of study I did. My strategic inquiry was that I was using qualitative study because I was doing a phenomenology approach. And my phenomena was the perception of on the influence for choice. My worldview, of course, was constructivist, and of course that is about how my participants perceive certain things, and I used that completely. My role, basically I did a self-assessment of myself, and then I disclosed my extensive background and my connections with mentoring, and I employed reflective journalism to control my biases. My data was collected by using a single stage convenience sample. I did individual interviews. I used a like instrument to get my demographics. Then I did the interviews, and it was 16 questions from 7 categories. And each interview was digitally recorded, and the interviewees were actually able to member check their what was transcribed for accuracy. In the process of doing that, of course, I was looking for starting up a coding, which gave me my themes. And then I looked at my transangulation, and of course that included multiple data, which were coming from my 4 interviews. It also talked about my my approach to have the data transcribed twice, once by myself and once by a professional transcriber. And then, of course, the reliability, all the questions were asked the same way to each individual, each participant. And of course, the reflexivity was the assessment of the trustworthiness, and of course, my journaling again. And that my journaling kept me, it kept me to record my feelings, my emotions, my assessments of things, so that they didn't interfere with what was going on. And of course, my each interview had a choice to participate. My ethical conclusion basically was talking about using approaches that were trustworthy and were going to give quality. So therefore, I followed the protocol from IRB almost to the letter. Okay, chapter 4. Okay, this is the results of my. This is the results of my study. I used 4 participants in interview, and they all had several years of leadership skill, and also they were all African American. And this is a chart to kind of basically give you an idea of their career exposure, their years of experience, and their current area, and of course the years that they had in mentoring. The central question again, which gave birth to my research, was how do African American males decide or perceive their choice, their lived experiences that influence their choice to mentor or not to mentor. From the discussions that came from those interviews, there were a few topics that came up or statements that came up, and it appears that there was a difficulty, that there was difficulty associated with that particular population. Also, there was an apprehension on the part of the African American males sometime to even engage with that population. And then in addition there was a desperate need for African American males to come forth and to be persistent. My first theme was that they're mutually beneficial relationships. And from that, it was saying that mentoring was most effective if, and it must be, that the mentee is met where he is. And since I'm talking about males, I'm using the gender he, where he is. They must capture the opportunities so that they can take advantage of free-flowing conversation with these young men. Also, they need to be willing to share information with these young men, and they must understand and help them understand how to establish and recognize healthy foundations. Mark was one of my interviewees, and I'm using pseudonames. Mark was one of my my participants, and he said, a great lesson for me and one that helped me realize just how much I got out of the relationship as well. Lawrence was another one, and his comment was enjoying my time with my mentee and letting him know that I was there if and when he might want to talk about anything. Wallace was another one, and his comment was that I had the pleasure of helping him with his homework and his schoolwork several times. The experience was most pleasurable for me. And then George basically said, we had to set safety rules so that nobody would get hurt. The excitement was a joy to experience. My second theme was the challenges. And what was coming out of that was their perception of the youth and the disparity of willing mentors to be there. So a couple of comments that came from that was the mentoring relationship must be personality driven, that you need to look for ways to break through and try to help them to understand positive validation. That we need to encourage them to receive and recognize and embrace accomplishments, and also to help them to overcome their self-imposed barriers. Mark stated that it's the personality that would drive the relationship in most cases, particularly with a mentee. Lawrence said, older kids are tougher than younger kids, I think, because they have already been molded in certain ways. Wallace stated that they don't necessarily see or pay attention to the consequences. They are looking at the time, here and now, with the assumption that it won't happen to me, as a quote from him. These young men need help. Someone who will show them a better way to sustain something for a long time and stop focusing on the short term or the quick and fast buck, because easy come, easy goes. And on that particular statement, George last said, when I hear the term at risk, it comes to my mind is barriers. They don't have good concepts of right from wrong from their home training. Then I think about their environment, and there's not a lot of positiveness there. These guys need someone who can help them navigate through some of the foolishness. My third theme was to mentor and not to mentor. And basically some of the comments that came out of that was that mentoring is critically necessary for today's population and society. It's not a matter of choice, it's a matter of necessity. And that mentoring is critical for, especially based on the deficits associated with this at-risk population. And then the last one was, we must continue to invite and encourage others to give back and pay forward. Lawrence stated that, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a scarcity of men who could be available, but there is a lack of knowledge of how to get started, how to make the first step. That may be enough to distract them a lot. Then he further went on and said, I personally know very few black mentors and even less black male mentors in my daily walk. And I think in an intentional outreach to target and recruit, share a couple of stories, because often heard and seen, often we are blind to so much information that we hear and see without really knowing that we've heard it or seen it. I believe there's a need to be some blitz that just hit the masses, and hopefully you get a few mentors. I personally have not seen any knowledge blitz in my circle. There are rarely any conversations about mentoring. There is no avenue of encouragement to the mentor. Wallace stated that it's critical to have an adult male readily available to mentor young men because they need help, and time is not waiting on anyone. I believe that to mentor anyone, no matter what age, there needs to be a special person who is willing to help in some way, to help steer the person towards becoming a better person, to equip them with life and to help that person establish some goals. The adult needs to understand that this young person needs help, and that the adult needs to want to help that young person change a course of life from a prison pipeline. We have to share the real need for mentors and not sugarcoat it. We must constantly pray for good people who will use their gifts and give back to the community and society. We have got to start paying it forward and sincerely realize that it is a blessing to be a blessing. It may not be easy, but patience and diligence can be most rewarding. Okay. And George stated that you can never give up in mentoring. These young men have experienced too much of that all their lives, and they are looking for us as mentors to do the same. But it is critical for us to hang in there, regardless of how many times you question yourself as to what in the world am I doing. We must look down the road to see the potential that is there and help them realize the cold, hard truth that no one came into this world walking, talking, and running, etc. We need to realize that we did not get where we are today without some type of help, and we need to reciprocate. We need to be the first and the only soul. We may be the first and only soul foundation they have ever had in their lives, and we can be the guiding light. They'll remember it. I know I did. George further said that we can't give up. Every opportunity we get, we must share and embrace them as genuine, caring adults who want only the best for them, who will be there in the long haul to accompany them through tough times and to help them realize what they learned from the experiences. So an assessment and conclusion for this was that African American adult males were able to have a voice in this particular research. That was through the approach of critical race. That media that targets and attracts African American is non-existent. That African American males must face their fears and change and charge forward, and life is not always always present for us with situations of comfort. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, again, my lit review, I'm talking about all the things, and I'm going to show you how this all connects. When I line it up with my research questions, my central research question again is, how do African American adult males perceive their lived experiences that influence their choice to mentor or not to mentor? Mark said, the type of mentoring I typically do is a lot less formal. I can count the number of times I have been in a formal mentoring situation. I prefer the self-select process because that way both the mentee and I can elect to form a relationship or not, and no one loses face. Lawrence said, I have not had the experience of mentoring a youth with what I term as high-risk factors. However, I believe they lack real good role models and someone who could kind of help them make good decisions, because their environment is a haven of bad or less desirable behavior, and it is very hard to form good choices when it is not in their norms. George stated that I see them every day. They want to go with the crowd in their appearance, in their speak, in their demeanor. They seem to rarely, if ever, have a positive person who can help them understand there's a proper place and time for everything. I'm sorry, that was Wallace. George said, being a teenager is hard enough, but trying to fit in and be accepted is more complex than most people realize. It is not about strong values. It is not about strong values, because their values that they've established in the hood are strong but misdirected. One of my sub-questions was, and I didn't use my second sub-question because they kind of answered that in my central question as well. So my second sub-question was that how do African American adult males perceive their choice to mentor or not to mentor African American adult adolescents and young adult males with high risk factors? And Mark said, as for myself, I do, and I believe we need to spend additional time with that youth to really find out what they really are interested in, then take the situation handed us to capitalize on those challenges, to capitalize on what they need and taught and instill, or whatever is plant the seed. Older youth seem to like challenges, so strap on your boots, because you're going to have to be ready to and alert and thinking way ahead of them. Challenging them with logic and rationalization often works, especially if you're building a strong rapport before the contest begins. This has worked for me because I realized that kids are smart, sometimes smarter than they even think they are. But they need a good positive change to put things moving in the right direction. I have enough confidence in our youth, in spite of the issues, to believe that they could solve 90% of the problems we face today and others within the foreseeable future. We must be there for them and help guide and direct them, but give them the protection space to explore. Lawrence addressed that question saying, I feel just knowing human nature and understanding behavior a bit, that the older the youth is, the harder it is going to be to reach them. They have totally different dynamics operating, and their priorities are much different. What motivates them is very different. I think if you reflect on your own teenage life, or others of your children, or some children that you have had some encounters with, capitalizing on what you remember. If it's sports, get involved and get them involved. They are too young to work. At least help set them up with a shadowing experience, with a career or a series of careers with realistic exposures. If they need work, help them understand the principles of managing money wisely. Wallace stated towards that question was, many African American males I know use the excuse of the lack of time for everything, and mentoring is not different. Others have their own agendas like work and family. We are very self-centered. They never consider giving back. Those of us who do are very few. We need to take a second look at the state of our society. We are losing our youth, especially our males, at record numbers all over the nation. There was a time when we lost a lot of our men due to war, but today is crime, deprivation, and health. We have got to become more visible and active so that we can share, influence, encourage others that I'm here to help and make a change occur. We have got to stop sitting on our royalty waiting on a change to come. It may be tough sell, but we must be diligent and persistent, telling our story and encouraging others to devote some time to create and share their stories. We cannot accept no for an answer from our peers, just like we cannot accept no from our youth if we are really concerned about our lives and their future and our futures. And George came and said, the odds may be against us and them, but we can never give up trying. I think back and wonder if my coach, teacher, mentor had given up on me, where would I be? I need to help our youth understand that everybody is not going to be a superstar, but we can be the best you can be. And who knows, being the best may open up doors for you to rub elbows with some superstars. You must acknowledge the worth within our young people, even when it cannot be seen. We also need to encourage our personal friends to give mentoring an earnest chance. We may be amazed at what we see in them and in others, and in ourselves. Okay, so based on that, the conclusion here was that although African American males today may not have experienced some of the struggles that are referenced in during slavery or during the military and wars, but or even during Jim Crow times, but all of them have experienced some form, in some degree, of humiliation, of devaluing from some parts of society. And those things are real for them. Manipulating the racial hierarchy creates and perceives social control, birthing cultural beliefs and ideologies that deliberately designed for the detriment of their construct and for African American, especially the males, which causes a systemic pervasiveness. And it has been documented that in certain times in the past, our African American males went through stages of denial, of separation, withdrawal, and marginalization. So, and that was by Crosby. Many African American adult males hesitate to come forward to mentor because they develop defense mechanism for protection, and that's Matisse, and of course those defense mechanisms are those the ones that are there, the separation and denial. Okay. Implications for policy and leadership. Basically, we're talking about the at-risk and the high-risk youth. This is a growing population. This is a growing population today, and it's due to economics, education, and social status. And there is a dire need for us to have African American males to come forth to help us with this, because they need to be a ready presence and capable of intercepting and redirecting some of the vulnerability factors that these young men are facing. The lack of, that was Manfrey, the lack of American adult males as leaders suggests creating a void because of beneficial factors in life of others, especially the vulnerable males. And that was Grant and Diker. Recommendations for future research. The expansion of this research should include more qualitative and then the introduction of quantitative research. Also, trying to reach for deeper understanding and more rich data. It could further close the gap in the literature. However, the insights that could be gleaned from this study might help develop new ideas that can pose hypotheses for potential research, enabling more and different methods of collection for the predictions. Note, this study has, we have identified a model, and it will be acknowledged and announced within the next 30 to 60 days. These are some select references that I used, and that concludes this, and I open the floor for questions, comments. I'll turn it over to Dr. Ford. Thank you.
I want to congratulate you for a piece of research that's well done. In detail, particularly as pertains to the references that you cited at the very end, are very, very definitely applicable to the significance of this study. But before we go into opening questions up to the floor, and I'd like to start when those questions come, can you go back and to the slide where you talked about limitations and delimitations, and review that for the committee again, the section of limitations and delimitations, which was at the very beginning, and talk a little bit about the expansiveness of that area. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay. My limitations basically were, that's something that I can't control. And the main thing was I had to depend on how my interviewees interpreted what I was saying. That was the first thing. And I also had to realize that there may be an element where they were actually giving me what they thought I wanted. So, and there's nothing I can do about those things. My delimitations are things I could control, and that was basically the type of research I did and the questions I used.
Now, with that as a start, this is great. I'm impressed with what you've done. A couple of things in terms of elaboration. You made a reference several times at the very beginning of your presentation on critical race theory.
Yes.
And of course, I know in that regard you were referring to the research of Bell and others.
Yes.
I'll elaborate on that, particularly as it relates to the background that you felt was absolutely necessary and appropriate leading to the review of the literature.
Okay. Because there was no information out there that I could find that addressed their choice, I had to look at critical race, because critical race allowed a lens to be created that would enable us to, on marginal populations, to be heard, and that their stories could be told. So I ended up using that because that's what my interviews were designed to do, is to let African American men talk about choice and the influence of choice for the first time that I could find, because I could not find any literature on it. So that was the purpose for the critical race, taken from that approach, because that was what his purpose was.
Okay, now secondly, there was a reference to the issue of controlling bias.
Yes.
On the part of you as the principal researcher.
Yes.
Tell us the strategies that you use to handle bias control, quote unquote.
Okay. One of the things that I did was I basically disclosed the fact that I understood, and I wanted to make sure my audience understood, that I was coming from a place where I had extensive background. And so I disclosed that and shared what that experience was, which was the state and federal level of mentoring. So I wanted to make people know, or help people understand that's where I was coming from. But I also wanted to make sure that I was not letting any of that trickle over into my interviews, not leading questions, not asking questions that were directed or anything like that, but for me to do a journal so I could keep up with what I was thinking and feeling, although I couldn't say it. So that helped me do that. Because if I didn't have that outlet, I may have interjected something that was of me, and I was trying to stay totally out of the picture. It was their story.
And did that also help you with your data analysis?
It did the same thing with the data analysis and the collection. It did it for both. Yes.
Then the member checking would help with that also.
Yeah, the member check was theirs, not mine.
Right.
Yeah, not mine. I didn't check it. They did.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Getting it back to them.
Right. Yeah, they each had their stuff, and I incorporated what they said. If I misunderstood something, put it in there the way they said it.
Now, before we open up to general questions beyond this stage, if the committee would allow me, I'd like to ask if we could get some input, if it's appropriate at this time, from Dr. Matisa. He's on the line, as you know, electronically, and I'll make sure he gets into this before he has to leave. Dr. Matisa, what's your comment?
Yes, can you get the mic closer to you, right? So I can hear you. I can hear.
Okay.
Voulynne is.
He wants to hear.
Yeah, just give us the benefit of your input at this time. You've been with this study since the beginning. You've been a very valuable member of the committee. What's your final reaction?
My final reaction is that I was very impressed by the study. It started in a very difficult position, but since it's almost an exploratory new foundational study, it brings a very important aspect of research in terms of social behavioral sciences, and also in terms of leadership, which raised inquiry about how do we translate policies, social policies, also the law and the education process to really address those issues which are in society for a long time. It's a good bordering or emerging research area which is usually not easy to study, and I commend now soon to be Dr. Small's for opening that area, because a lot of studies those and they are into that, and I like the qualitative aspect of it. It's just done a good job with trying to develop a methodology. The application of methodology to be more credible and viable. The only question I want to ask her is, and then after that I'll just break off so I can, because I'm satisfied with the final presentation, and actually more talking about the first one, so it shows good scholarship and research. Then I wanted to just talk quickly about how does this study relate to the leadership studies program. How did that prepare her to be how do you going to apply to what you're finding in research? How does it prepare to you as a leadership person in leadership studies program?
Could each of you hear that? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, good.
As a leadership emphasis, basically, I looked at people who had some leadership experience or had extensive years, because everybody, I think the lowest person was like 10 years of leadership experience. So I used that to pull from their ideals to try to see what their ideal would be as to not only what influences their choices, but what could we do about it. And I think that was some of the things that came out of it from a leadership standpoint, because you have to be a leader to actually reach out to other people and invite them to come in and join what you're doing. And also you have to be a leader to your mentees, because I mean they're looking to somebody who is honestly going to be helping them, guide them through the paths of life, and not letting them, not doing like peers would do and lead them astray. So that's the purpose. That's what I would suggest or recommend that's coming out of this, or suggest that's coming out of this with me for the Leadership Studies Department.
And then, anything else on this?
But I'm going to give my feedback and writing and sending the form, so because I'm in backup for this session starting. My questions have been answered, so I'll just respond to my final assessment by Monday. I'll communicate that one.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Giesen. We really appreciate that. Dr. Alston has been with the committee at leadership role since the beginning, so I wanted to speak next in terms of her impressions of what she has heard.
I, in concert with Dr. Ford and Dr. Leticia, I really do appreciate the development of your study. It has evolved very nicely. You have presented, your document is very sophisticated, and I applaud you for being courageous in taking on this topic, especially as an African-American female, right? Because it's not always easy to engage in research, and for this particular, you purposely, and intentionally focus on African-American males, but you're a female, right? So I did want to definitely state that and put that first and foremost. I also appreciate how you digested our feedback from the pre-defense, and you definitely incorporated it in conjunction with the recommendations from the department chairperson, Dr. Apollo. So thank you for doing that. My question, this is the only question I have, because I've asked you a lot of questions over the years, right? But my question is, so now what? How are you going to share this good news? How are you going to, I know that you're heavily involved and engaged with different networks and, the grant work that you do, and, you as a leader yourself, right, in this space of mentoring. How do you plan on sharing to the world and helping other people improve their mentoring models or their mentoring practices to further develop future leaders who are African American males?
Okay. Well, let me first say, based on what I said as futuristic things that were coming, this model that we have, we've identified, so we're going to be publishing that within the next couple of months. So that will actually be out there. That would be one thing. But in addition to that, I've been fortunate enough to be asked by the National, as well as by the Chronicle of Mentoring, to submit something to them, because there is no research. And this would be a first, because nobody has ever addressed, they ask mentors about the children, the youth, and what is their perception about, of mentoring, how the kids think about mentoring. They ask them about the agency, but they never ask them about the choices that they make. And that was very key for me, because we have African American males, we have African American male leaders, but they don't come forth. And so, and I think we'll be hard pressed to accept the fact that we don't have a male crisis, because I know we do. We would be hard pressed to try to say we don't. And since we do have a crisis, it seems natural for me that you would come forth men would come forth and be ready to step in. But I think some of the things that came out of this research helped me to understand maybe why they don't. Because it is a tough age. Teenagers know everything. They've been everywhere and have not been anywhere. And they are too old to be babies and they're too young to be adults. So they're really trying to carve out a notch for themselves. And they do a whole lot of stupid stuff. But they're a hard group to talk with and they're a hard group to work with. So I can understand that from where a male would come, because most males don't want to waste their time challenging you and trying to get you to open up to me and see another point of view, because I know everything. And so that's, that's kind of one of the challenges I think that I gleaned from the study that African American adult males were experiencing, because they, it's a difficult group. It's a difficult group. So I'm hoping that a couple of suggestions. Maybe there's a way to target African American males where they can have a comfort about what they do and how they do it if they were mentoring. I know that what I have experienced from some of the people I work with, some of the guys I work with, they talk about having realistic scenarios to walk through in a safe environment. And that may help another male who may think this is challenging. It might help them to realize that, okay, if I can handle it this way, I can do this. So that's kind of where that is. As far as other futuristic kinds of things, I do plan to pursue this further. Because this just cracked, it didn't break it, it cracked the ceiling for me. Because there are an awful lot more I want to know about this. And I really am interested in just delving right into it, is to try to find out what it is that is causing them to think the way they think. But also, what can we do about those thought processes? Because that's the thing that I hate to have, I don't like people complaining all the time. Give me a solution. So that's where I am. Yes, let's identify the problem, but give me a solution so that we can actually work on something. That's the way I live my life. Okay.
Moving ahead, and I appreciate very much the comments and input given by Dr. Alston. Dr. Woodman, who is from Fayetteville State University and one of the faculty there, is a very strong source of influence and presence on this committee, and at this time I'd like to ask whether she has any comments.
Yeah. My comment was the same. Where are we going with this? I had in terms of maybe an elevator speech. What would you sum up as the reason if someone approached you to mentor or not to mentor? How would you sum that up? Your one main reason or
One main reason?
Finding.
From the finding? Because our kids need it.
Okay.
That's the finding.
Okay. And then a little more detail. If you go
I'm sorry?
From your research.
That's from the research also.
Okay.
That's what the research said. Our kids are hurting. That's what the research said.
Anything else? Okay. Then Dr. Louis has been very courageous and present in relationship to his articulating the position taken by the graduate college. For those of you who are not involved in this process, graduate college makes the decision as to whom they will identify as the ultimate member of the faculty who will serve on that committee, on this committee, this dissertation committee, as a representative for and speaking for, if you will, on behalf of the graduate college. So Dr. Tripoli was chosen by the assistant dean of the graduate college for that function. So Doc, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Ford, and again, good morning. Let me first of all applaud you for your research. It clearly reflects your passion. I've worked with this lady in her business. We've written a funded proposal together, and she has a good business. So this clearly reflects what you do. And again, I applaud your committee members. I didn't come on board until your final defense. Usually, graduate college representative comes in during the proposal stage. Nevertheless, I'm pleased with the work that your committee has done. One of my central questions has been asked. You gave a statement of the problem, and as I was listening to you, only your committee members really know what the problems are. I read your dissertation is there, but this audience here really don't know. But you have answered those questions during, just my question is, what do we currently know? Where is the gap? You currently
30 minutes.
Okay, maybe that's right. But when you said, okay, I know they know. They know. So do I answer the question?
30 minutes.
The other question I have, I think I will send this to you and Dr. Ford, is nothing but satisfaction itself. It has nothing to do with your presentation.
Yes.
You mentioned 15 questions in 7 categories. I was actually looking for those 15 questions, or at least direct the readers to your appendix. They are not in your dissertation. You need to state them. What are they? From those 15 questions, you came up with the 3 things, right?
Yes.
Okay, what are those 3 questions? If I may ask you, can you tell us 2 or 3 of those questions you asked them? Because we didn't know what to ask them besides those things.
Okay. Basically, I asked them, and I'm just trying to think right off the top of my head, because that's been about a year ago. So I think one of the questions was, how did they perceive mentoring at-risk youth? I also asked them, how would they describe at-risk or high-risk factor youth? Then I also asked them, what else did I ask? I asked them, oh my goodness.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Again, in your dissertation, when someone who doesn't really know much about it is reading it,
yes.
Either you direct them to the appendix where you list those questions, or somewhere in your chapter 3 under methodology that, 15 central questions asked, these questions included the following.
Okay.
We are not, you've already condensed those 15 questions into 3 things.
Right. Okay.
Do you agree with me? Again, congratulations on the job.
Okay.
Yeah, I added as an appendix because you want to make sure you add it in the way that IRB has approved.
Okay.
Because you had to submit your interview protocol to IRB to get the approval. So yeah, just add it.
Well, it's there. It's already there.
Okay.
Yeah. The demographics one as well as as that one. They're both there, along with their approval. It's there.
And then finally, following, as I indicated at the beginning, Dr. Paul has played a major role in this process in her role as the leader of a department which basically centralizes itself on 2 areas of focus, that being 1, PhD in leadership studies, and secondly, the whole area of the master's and graduate degree study as far as adult education is concerned. So I'm going to ask her for making a comment at this time too.
Thank you, Dr. Ford, and thank you, committee members. Thank you very much, Voulynne. You've done a great job, and I commend you for your presentation. And like some of the members mentioned, they've read it, they've heard it many times. I've read it, but some of these people here haven't. They haven't read your dissertations, and we do have some students here that will be presenting soon, hopefully. And so I would like you to touch back on how the participants were selected and whether you had some inclusion criteria for your participants.
Okay. I did have some very specific criteria based on what mentoring the headquarters defines as an adult is they will be 25 or older. And I used African Americans because those are people who are of African descent, or at least, from what I was looking for. Okay. But basically, what I was asking them, oh shucks, I lost my thought. Hold on 1 second. When I'm looking at what my questions were and what I was trying to glean from them, I basically was looking at how could I address my research questions. and come up with a list of questions that I was asking them to give me a whole body of things, because a lot of times they would answer one question, but they'd also answer a second question or a third question in that one question. So it was kind of, you know, that's kind of how they gave it to me, but I didn't try to separate it out. It was their story, the way they gave it to me. So that's kind of how I did it. And I hope I answered your question, because I think I lost it.
So, the demographic questionnaire that you used?
Yes.
Talk about how you use that to define your...
Thank you, that helps me. Thank you, please, thank you. My demographics, basically what I was looking for is not only how many had they had any leadership experience. I was also looking for what kind of career exposures they had, what kind of positions they were in. I was looking for the years they had mentored. I wanted to know how many years they had, what the length of time was that they had been in their career profession, their choice of professions. So those were the things that I was looking for, because that helped me understand their leadership. And if you know, if it was a person who had just gotten a job, and you know, it might not have been an adequate match. But all of these people had at least 10 years of experience in their fields. Okay.
But how did you select?
How did I select them? I did the single. I did the. I'm drawing a blank on everything. I did the single selection, and I did that because these were people that I knew, and I had ready access to them. A couple of people asked me, in talking, they said, you know, I'm interested in this if I can help. So of course I went back to them when I got to the point where I could do that and asked them, are you still willing? So that was kind of how it was. But the other ones, I had access to them. I could reach out to them readily. I had their information, and I could get them to give it back to me.
So perhaps in your document, you may just want to add a sentence that says, because we know and understand, but for other people that, you know, you intentionally use purposeful sampling for identifying your percentages.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Okay.
That's an excellent point.
Okay.
Dr. Paul, any others? You want?
Love it, and I think I love the findings, because somewhere someone said, paying it forward
Yes.
based on their experiences.
Yes.
So it seems like they were mentored.
Yes. Yeah. And that was another criteria. They had to either have mentored or had been mentored. That was the criteria that I used. Okay. Sorry about that.
One last observation, and then we'll open up for the general questions if there are any from those of us who are here in the audience sitting behind me. And by the way, I'm pleased, Dr. Charles, I know you are too, with the fact that a number of our most recent graduates from this program are here today, which is great. I'm looking at Dr. Wilkins, for example, and also Dr. Wilson. Final observation is this. Again, excellent study. I think that if you pay particularized attention to the suggestions made at the very end by Dr. Shofaluli and others, that we'll be in great shape. I think that the real focus of this whole question is one of the paucity of research done in this area as it relates to the whole issue of male mentoring. And you know, the literature is replete with the topic of mentoring males, even to the point of having scientific programs that are developed specifically to ensure that they are exposed to math and science and et cetera. But the point is that she has pointed out a very critical lack, and I'm hoping that as a result of this study, we're hoping as a result of this study, that more research will be done in direct relationship to the interaction between the role of the would-be mentor and the extent to which he or she is willing to take on that responsibility. And that is a huge task. It really is. It's a huge task. Now, in conclusion, then, I'm going to ask if there are any suggestions or questions from those in the audience. Dr. Wilkins or any others?
I got a comment and I got a question. I want to be quiet and patient.
I just got a suggestion for soon to be Dr. Smalls. As Dr. Apollo was trying to get you to pull it out about the purposeful sampling, you might want to go back to Creswell or Yen.
It was Creswell. That was where it was.
Well, you need to just state that what they were doing, you said they were experts, they were subject matter experts. That's why you interviewed them. You know they knew what they were doing.
But they weren't experts, not on mentoring.
Right.
Yeah, not on this particular thing. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying, she asked you why or how did you select
Selecting.
those? Yeah.
So how did I
And
select?
you said you selected because they knew what they was doing.
No, I don't think I said that.
Well, I misunderstood you.
Yeah, I don't think I said that. I knew them.
Yeah, you knew that.
I knew them. Okay? So I had ready access to them.
Okay.
Now, not that they knew what they were doing. No, I knew them. Okay? Personally. And so I had a pool of people that I knew. And I knew I could get to.
And you know they had some experience
Yeah,
with mentoring.
yeah, I knew that too, but I didn't, I had them to do the demographics, which told me so, to verify what it was. I knew they had done mentoring or had been mentored. I knew that. So it was kind of, they were kind of targeted. That I picked them. No, not that they knew what they were doing. I didn't say that. I'm sorry if you misunderstood me with
Well,
that.
I was just going to suggest you refer back to Creswell. You said you got Creswell.
Yeah, and that's in my information. Yeah.
I noticed at the end you had to be a model,
Yes,
and I would be interested
in the model.
in the model.
Okay.
I would also be interested in seeing that the model could be used within our program,
Okay.
graduate program here.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, I came through from when the department was within arts and sciences, and it wasn't even didn't even have well, we didn't even have it wasn't even called education. I mean, but we were in education, right? And then to see it move to become a department and then to become a school and now a college, you know, I'm really great. So I'd really like to see us start using our own research within our program. That's been the one thing that I've seen missing on our campus, not necessarily in education, but across the board. We do this great research and we publish and we do all of that, but if you come back to the college, you're going to find it, and I think that's critical.
We very much appreciate Dr. Groofer's comments there. As I said earlier, she served for a number of years as a member of the Board of Trustees. In fact, I chaired it. And I can tell you, as the chancellor at that time, I knew that well, and she was an extraordinary source of support to me. Now, we have one last comment. The young lady who spoke and said she'd hold hers off until the end. Go ahead.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll go after you. I just wanted to say, my husband and I foster teenagers. We will not take any other age. You have to be 13 or older, and you have to be a male. And particularly, we like our African American males, but we don't say that. We've been blessed to have what we, were seeking. And in the course of that, I have sought mentors. I have spent relentless hours, and my husband had not been at work, he would have been here to verify this, looking for African American mentors. I didn't know Miss Small. In my pursuit, I came across Miss Small. And when I met her, I was at the point of giving up. And I shared my story with her. And she said, you know what, I'm gonna open, and I might get teary. She said, I'm gonna open up a place for the children. But I said I wasn't gonna do this. But the thing is, I come from an era and time where we were of the belief it took a village.
And it do.
And what Ms. Small has done is very consistent with mentoring. It was just different time, different terms. And as I was listening to her, she touched on an area where she said there's not a lot of media coverage. Now today we're living in an area and a time where there is high-tech ways of communicating. We got Snapchat, particularly for teenagers, they might get Twitter, Facebook, the list goes on. But no one has a mentoring page. Now, this lady is passionate. I mean, she has a passion that is beyond what I've ever seen or experienced, and I am too. For me to take on a teenager as this thing in town, the things she touched on, they know everything, they've been everywhere. Some of the people she used to do her study, Andrew, the people you called out, they made some very important points. This is a time of an age where children are resistant. They don't want to hear a lot of things. They have their own agendas, whatever, but we shouldn't use that as an excuse. So not to carry this on and on, we got to look within ourselves. You know, we talk about everything we see around us and how we're disadvantaged and this and that, and who won't let us prepare for it. We won't do a lot of things for our own selves, for our own children. And what is mentoring other than being a village for each other? So that's it. Thank you.
That's great. We'll take this last comment from.
Okay, we need a last comment. And just very quickly, historically, this whole mentoring thing has been handled or mishandled by our church community, particularly in the African American community. Did you see, just an extrapolation of what you've already said in your research and your interviews, did you see any incentive to share with some of the leaders in the African American churches, or were some of the interviewees already active in their churches and felt like they were incentivized or had reason to go back and share that in that religious community?
Let me answer it this way. Yes, I have shared it with several. And I'm trying to figure out how to do this politically correct so that nobody hangs me after I leave out of here. But the one thing I have I've discovered with working with the churches is that the message is to outreach, but the method is enclosed. And our churches don't do outreach. They want to save everybody or mentor everybody or whatever, teach everybody within their walls. That seems to be the method that I see. And it's not extended to the people in the projects or in the housing authority or whatever. It's, if you're in our walls, we'll take care of it. And I find that to be very unchristlike. If we talk about being Christians and we're supposed to be Christ-like, he went everywhere. And in some of the worst of places. He didn't get his disciples. And I see it as being contradictory. So I'm not criticizing, because I love my church. I know you love yours and all that other stuff. But I do see that as a fallacy. I really do. And I wish that they would be open. But I also see a lot of people who do a lot of stuff and call it mentoring, and they're really not doing mentoring. That's a big issue.
Oh, Dr. Small, let me just say this to you, and it's just a challenge to you for future. Dr. Schmidt talked about a model in the future that maybe they would do a better job if they had a model to follow and a leader to take them there. And so that is just something I want to put to you as a professional challenge, that you can't make them drink once you take them to the water, but you can share the water with them. So that's the end of my
I
comment.
take that. I take that. I take that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ford, for allowing us to.
Thanks very much, Dr. Street. We're going to stop at this juncture. The committee will go into executive session and finalize this decision, and then I'll call the question I asked you to come back to the room, okay? So don't leave, just hang out. It gives me great pleasure to indicate the fact that by a unanimous decision, Ms. Small has now become Dr. Small.
Yeah! You know it! Nationwide! Everywhere we go, people want to know, who are those new Mandingos?
Again, a special note of commendation to Dr. Street for his presence as the former chair of the Board of Trustees for this great university. And also, I very much appreciate what we received from Dr. Fowler, the chair of this joint committee. And I want to congratulate those of you who, within the past year, have already crossed this hurdle. And I'm really impressed with the fact that you took the time out to come here and to be involved in this activity. And Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Wilson have been a part of it. So let's give them a hand, too. For final statement, let me just say this, that this is a very intensive program, and it requires a lot of stick-to-itiveness. It requires a lot of willingness to go that extra mile. It is not an easy task, and the Board of Trustees have made it very clear that they will continue to support this program, but they will also continue to insist that we produce the same kind of students that this last year has produced. So you should be aware of that. Dr. Small, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I can't say that enough or emphatically enough. Thank you for all your support, for all your help, your encouragement. I just thank you. Best team on earth. I would like to acknowledge my classmates, Linda, Ron, and Evelyn. So I do want to thank y'all for coming. And of course, recognizing my family, who always support me. My sister Prudence and her husband Ricky, my sister France and her friend Tony. So I do want to recognize them. That's my girl. We talk all the time. And I thank you for your comments. Hopefully, when I hear stuff like that you saying, I thank you for allowing me to know that I have made an impact. So, and I can't not thank Bill, because that's my matriarch cousin. So I'm thankful that she was willing to change her schedule and be here in support of what I was doing. So she told me, she said, I'm gonna be there. So she did make sure I'm gonna be there. So I do thank you.
Just tell them about the food.
Oh, yes, the reception is here. So please come join and partake.